Awesome. Well, welcome everyone to Arizona Gives Workshop, 5 signs that your brand has put your audience to sleep. I am Karina Ye Hilliard, the Events and Marketing Manager at the Alliance of Arizona Nonprofits. I will be your facilitator for today. Just want to remind everyone that you will be on mute for the duration of this session. We will have time at the end where you can ask questions live. Should you have any questions during the presentation, please put them in the chat box and I will be monitoring it and making note of any of your questions that we can ask at the end. If you are hearing impaired or would like subtitles, we have provided a transcription you can access by clicking the closed caption icon at the bottom of your screen. And we will be recording this so that you can view it at a later time with the email that we send out to you tomorrow with a link to the slide deck copy as well as chat transcription and any other resources that are mentioned. So today I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker, Emily Soccorsy. She believes that all great brands are a spiritual experience. As a co-founder and CEO of Root and River, a brand strategy team, she uses her talents to help leaders uncover the foundations of their brand, message, mission, strategy, and integrate them into their leadership, culture, and marketing. Working with national and international clients, Emily loves to challenge dogmatic thinking, infuse art into strategy, and encourage leaders to go inward. As a former journalist and publisher, she is the co-author of the book Rooting Up, Essays on Modern Branding, and holds a master's in nonfiction writing. So welcome, Emily. We are so happy to have you.
Thank you so much, Karina, for having me. I'm really honored to be with you today. And I hope you will speak up and chat. Karina is going to be watching it for me as I kick off and throughout the presentation. So if there's a question, I've told her, if there's a question that comes up that seems like, okay, we got to answer this question before we move on, I'll pause and we'll take a quick question. But I'm leaving time at the end for additional conversation and questions as well. And so I also encourage you to drop questions in there. And to, if you want to have a discussion, hold your questions to the end. Apologize for the dog barking, but you know how it is these days. All right, well, I'm going to kick off. Actually, I'm going to share my screen here. So today what we're going to talk about is 5 signs that your brand has put your audience to sleep. So this is something that is really common, and we'll get into the reasons why, but in the post-pandemic world, there's been a lot of restraint with branding and a lot of fear about what do I do? So audiences have kind of been lulled in some cases, or maybe you've tried extra hard, but it just feels like maybe the brand isn't landing the way you wanted it to. So today we're going to just visit around how we can try to wake people up, and also maybe take a good but hard look at what we're doing so far with the brand right now to see where we might be going a little bit astray. So we have a poll. Can you recall the last time a piece of marketing or messaging spurred you to make a donation, since we're talking to nonprofits, or to purchase something? So just a simple yes, no here. If you can just think about it for a minute. Piece of marketing or message that you read that made you kind of make a purchase or make a donation.
Okay, we'll give it 10 more seconds here.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, about 50-50. So this is very good indicator of the quote that we, that marketing works 50% of the time. We just don't know which 50. So in some cases, we can easily recall. For me, I remember several years ago, this was probably about 4 years ago, I got a piece of content about charity water, and it was all around a story about one of the wells that they had created. And right away, I became a donor at that point. So that stuck out in my mind as I was preparing for today. And, really it was around storytelling, which is a powerful part, I'm sure, as you all know, of expressing a brand. And we're going to kind of look into why that is. Thank you. So thank you, Karina, for the introduction. So this is our team, Root and River. We are based here in Phoenix and also in Austin. That's Justin Foster, my business partner, and the co-founder in the hat. And we are a team that really focuses in on message, category, and telling the story of the brand. So we're pretty obsessed about that. And in this day and age, when there's so much language being thrown about, when we get 4,000 to 6,000 requests for our immediate action every day. And that was a stat that was pulled before the pandemic. So I bet it's like doubled or tripled by now. There's a glut of message. And so the words that we choose really matter, not just in getting people's attention, but they matter in terms of how they are aligned with us, with how they reflect what we believe in our souls and what the leadership of our organizations believe, and the energy that they give us. Because we're all overwhelmed by messages, and we probably feel a little bit overwhelmed by marketing and by sharing our organization's purpose. So that's what we focus on. Our clients run the gamut. Sometimes they are nonprofits, sometimes they are for-profits, sometimes they are a blend. They're social good organizations, or they're for-profits with a very strong ethic about giving back to the community. They're also what we call defiers. So they're trying to change their community, their world, or their industry with their brands. And we work with purpose-driven brands just like you. So we believe that great brands have souls, and these souls, there's one of three things that typically happen in organizations. Either the brand has a soul, and they know it, they've articulated it, and they're using it every day. And we think those are the strongest brands over time. Those are the most consistent and have the most sustained growth and become enduring brands. Or this other thing happens, that they know they have a soul, but they haven't fully expressed it and used it. So it's there, maybe it's being expressed internally, but it's not really translating to the marketing and to the messaging and to what you're sharing with your audience. So that's the second scenario. The third scenario is that it's there, but it's been a long time since you kind of excavated it, talked about it, really got into building your messaging around what that soul of truth is. And so those are kind of the three common scenarios. So let's do a level set on brand before we dive into these 5 signs. Brand, our definition of brand is not around logo, color, mark. Those are all manifestations of a brand. But a brand is really how other people experience what you believe. And the operative words there being experience and believe. So it is more than just observational. It's more than just something that brings you together as an organization internally. It's when you have what brings you together as an organization, the beliefs articulated, and you have observable behaviors that reflect those beliefs, that gives way to a brand experience that now your audience is a part of, they're bought into, and they want to continue to have experiences. A great example of this that pops to mind is Disney, right? They know what they believe, family fun and being transportative, imagination come to life. That's the center of what they do every day in their experiences. And people cannot get enough of it, right? They become Disney fans. They return year after year. And that's an example of an enduring brand that has stayed true to what they believe. I love to also point to musicians, because musicians are brands. So the last big concert I went to was, I think, 2019. Was the Innings Festival in Tempe at Tempe Town Lake. And I was there when Eddie Vedder came on stage. It was the first time that I had seen him live. And this is, I think, something that people get wrong about brands. They think that a brand is really making sure you've got a perfect perception for the outside world. And brands are no longer external constructs. They're more internally knowing who you are. They're intrinsic, and then sharing that truth with the world. So Eddie Vedder walked out, flannel t-shirt, some hiking boots, and just sat down. He and his guitar, he looked pretty disheveled, to be honest with you. But the experience he gave us was intimate. It was raw. He forgot some of the lyrics at some point. But what what happened was the crowd just came together spiritually, and we were elevated by that experience. It's something that it's happened 3 years ago, and I still get moved when I really sit and think about it. So that's another good example of a brand that is immersive and doesn't have to be overly polished in order to make an impact. Now, this isn't all just touchy-feely, it's also brain science. So our brains, we are hardwired, and research in neuroscience has shown that we are making decisions every day, and the time it takes, less time than it takes for us to blink our eyes, in the emotional part of the brain. So all decisions are emotional. And then our rational brain gets involved and it justifies those decisions, and it adds some rationale to those decisions. So in order to have a message or have a brand that stands out, we need to be focused on the emotion of our message. And we need to speak to that part of the brain because it helps us out. It helps us make a decision about, hell yes or hell no. That's kind of the emotion that we want to evoke. We want to kind of go to that level, particularly when you're looking at message, to determine what your message should be. So our rubric, we like to create rubrics for the work that we do for message, is SUE. So good messages, this is a great tip for you. Good messages are simple, so they're not complex ideas. They're not a run-on sentence. They're very usually declarative in nature. They are unexpected, so it has to break the schema of what people expect you to say. And I'll go into more detail on that. And then finally, it has to be emotional. So human beings are excellent at transferring emotion, especially when we tell stories. It's actually been shown to brains are actually syncing up during storytelling. It's a process called neurocoupling. So as I tell a story to you about being at the concert and it's dusty and dirty, and Eddie Vedder comes out sort of disheveled, I'm worried about what's going to happen. Is he going to be able to perform? And then he blows our minds. You are starting to think about what it would be like to be there, that feeling of the last concert that you went to. And so we're drawn in. So we must be emotional. We can transfer emotion if we feel it first. So if your organization's message isn't emotional for you, you cannot expect it to be emotional for other people either. A few things that we are fighting against right now, because I want to be real with you. This is hard work. Being a marketer, representing a brand is so difficult right now. I don't think there's been a more difficult time, actually. We're living in an infodemic, and that's a term that the Edelman organization came up with after their trust barometer survey they did last year. So there is so much information out there. I referenced it earlier, 4,000 to 6,000 requests for action a day. There's so many sources, right? And there are so many constant updates that we have really eroded our own trust in information. And on top of that, we have become victims of decision fatigue. So when we confront all these messages, we have to make so many decisions during the day, and the messages probably not too long into your day just sort of dull out, because our brains are really not built for processing this much information. And we are questioning the sources now all of the time. The good news in this is that the study showed that organizations, businesses, nonprofits such as yours, are still the most trusted form of information. So they're way more trusted than media and than government. So that's a silver lining for you. We're also kind of swimming at the same time in this sea of sameness. So we have this desire to want to stand out and be different, but with a lack of strategic clarity, we just end up kind of using the same tactics, following the same trends. Oh, I heard so-and-so did this in her organization, like, let's try it here. And so we're sort of rinsing and repeating some of the same trends that are coming up. And we're seeing trend-based marketing just kind of take over the space. So, whether it's, the latest and greatest thing on, Instagram stories or what have you, we're just seeing like a rush of people to that tactic and a lack of strategic consistency and clarity and storytelling that really just leads to more of the sea of sameness. And then we're also really obsessed with safety. So the last 2 years have been really difficult for us, right? We've all been told repeatedly to be safe, stay safe. So we have this mindset around safety that we are trained to use what I'm calling these caution blinders when looking at the world. I just recently, it was my 20th wedding anniversary, went on a trip to France, and I realized early on into the trip that I was expecting things to go wrong. I was expecting to, fail COVID tests. I was expecting all of these things to happen. That was kind of my orientation to the world. And I realized how much these caution blinders are really shaping us. And in organizations, I think we've become really afraid of doing something wrong, saying something wrong, being canceled. So this leads to, and lastly, we also are experiencing a crisis of meaning. People are resigning. People are changing their lifestyles. They're moving. They're really, all of this is around searching for meaning and purpose in their lives. And because of all of these factors, we're staying with safe approaches. We're staying with safe messages. And unfortunately, that's not going to let you stand out in that sea of sameness I talked about. Okay, so let's get to the 5 signs. And maybe you can kind of use these to look at your brand and see if you're accidentally falling into any of these. Now, this is a judgment-free zone. Don't worry if you are, it's not the end of the world, but we just want to get awareness on what we're doing in our brand. So the first one is lethargic messaging. And I alluded to this already. If your messaging is putting people to sleep, literally, it's not simple. It's not unexpected. It's not emotional. Then that really is lulling your audience into passing you by, scrolling on, not really being captured from your website. Here's a good way of looking at your brand, kind of taking this a step further. We have these terms that we use over and over and over again. And as I was preparing for today, I looked through a variety of Alliance member websites, and they were all awesome and wonderful, but I found these recurring words. And that doesn't mean you can't ever use any of these words, but these are words that tend to be a bit more overused within the space of nonprofits. So we like to do what we call kind of like a website audit from a language standpoint, going through, looking for cliches, colloquialisms, things that we are kind of language crutches that we're leaning on to explain who we are and what we do, and also look for these overly common words. And again, that doesn't mean you have to disassemble the whole website, but it's an opportunity to say to yourself, okay, if I'm using this term saving lives, is there another way that we could say that? Is there a story we could tell instead of saying that? So just an opportunity for you to do a little check. The second sign is we're really sluggish about our differentiation. So I love the sign. It's very funny, right? Committed to excellence, misspelled. But we're not really digging into what makes us different. And a lot of people approach differentiation more from the standpoint of benefits to their audience instead of looking deeply at what truly makes them different. So these are things that you do that no other organization does. And this should take a little bit of digging for you or for your leadership team, your marketing team. You really got to set aside time to dig into what are the things that we do differently than other organizations. All right, the next sign is that you have a really snoozy purpose. So funny story, I came home late one night from a business trip, and my daughter had left this little cute sign on her pillow. Good night, Mom, love you, please kiss me. So I'm like, oh, that's so snoozy, but adorable. But a lot of times we kind of can go to sleep around our purpose and mission. We often say at Root and River that missions suck because they're usually our mission statements suck. They're a run-on sentence of like all these ideas that we're piling on, but missions change the world. And when we work with our clients, we help them uncover very simple mission statements. They're usually no more than 5 to 7 words. And there's something that you don't necessarily always lead with, but they are a way to deepen the conversation. So for example, we worked with a client yesterday. They're in the real estate management area, but their mission is to create generational wealth. So it's very different for their space. And that's a deepener. It's a way to use a mission, a purpose to either draw in or push away potential clients, potential collaborators, potential supporters. So you really want to hone in on that mission and make sure that it is big, bold, and that it is said so succinctly that it really grabs attention. Here's some examples of some hilarious missions. I think they're funny because they're so bland and they're pretty vague. Profitable growth through superior customer service and quality, to be the leader in every market we serve. Okay, that's totally impossible. And to maximize stockholder value while adhering to the law. Like, that's the mission, to adhere to the law. I'm a little bit dubious about that organization. So just the power of a mission is huge. The power of a mission statement usually is pretty minimal. So just taking a look at what your mission statement is. All right, the next sign is Yanni visuals. So we've all been in that trap of like, quick, I've got to find something to throw in this, this piece of collateral or to send out with this donor letter, right? We've all been in those moments where we're like, quick, just grab something. But this is usually the easiest thing to change. One of another silver lining of the infodemic is that there are a lot of options when it comes to photos that don't have to be expensive. I use Unsplash a lot, and there's a lot of unusual photos there. We are fans of always putting your team, putting the visual, using who you have inside the building, or with obviously with permission, donors and volunteers on your website, making it real and getting rid of those Yanni visuals. The last one, this is my daughter Avery again, with just like the funniest face ever. Tired content. So what do I mean by tired content? It's kind of what I was referring to earlier, with so much of people following marketing trends and doing reels. This week we're doing reels, and last week we were doing this or that or the other. These pieces of content kind of become so ubiquitous that they blend into the marketing schema, and people don't see them anymore. They won't stop anymore. They lose their edge. So as an example, just did a few searches for how to, okay, over 16 billion responses, top 10 ways. You see all these numbers, they're huge. That doesn't mean you can't ever have a piece of content around that, but be judicious about how you're using these trends. Don't put all those content eggs in one basket. And if you're going to use one of these tactics, these approaches to marketing, infusing a really strong mission, infusing some really genuine visuals or some disruptive visuals with them can help stand out. So it's almost reverse engineering from these signs to make a piece of content really sing. So you can also really focus on, I spoke about this earlier, reviving your mission. I think that's one of the places I always think people can start, especially nonprofit organizations, looking truly at your mission. The way we define mission is it's a BFD, big freaking deal, but it is also, those stand for B. A mission is, it's going to be big enough that it's bringing up some challenges. Nobody ever heard their mission or uncovered their mission in life or in work and thought, yeah, no problem, we can get this done by the end of the week, right? It's something that will challenge you. It'll challenge you personally. It'll challenge you professionally. And if you're leading marketing, you're leading communication for an organization, here's a twist on this too, is to start with your own personal mission. And then doing that work will help you bring that work into the organization. So make sure that it's big enough, it's going to bring up a challenge. The second, the F, is that it evokes feelings. Once again, we want to get into that emotional center of the brain. So your mission should take your breath away a little bit. It's big. It's out there. We're here. We work with a client based out of Houston, and they're a capital investment group, but their mission is to end genocide in the world. They donate 50% of their profits to their foundation, which works in conflict zones to help end genocides. So that's a huge, it's very bold. It brings up challenges, and it brings up a lot of feeling. And then the last one, the D, is dent in the universe. So we need to understand how our mission makes a dent in the universe. So obviously for that example, we see the direct line of sight to the dent in the universe. At Root and River, our mission is to inspire leaders to go inward. And we feel that if we do that and they learn more about themselves and what they're here to do, and they treat the people around them in an in-kind way, we can start changing organizations, start changing American business, and then that really will have that dent in the universe. There's a huge business case for this, as you probably well know. I did a whole bunch of research around how purpose-driven businesses perform, and they, from a variety of sources, you'll see them on the bottom right corner, they perform 42% to 1,681% better than those that are neutral. So this is, again, a counter argument for that obsession with safety. Being safe in the way that you share the purpose for your organization, being safe in your messaging, it really actually hurts you. You will not stand apart as much as you could. So another thing to do is to awaken your weirdness. I shared some articles, and Karina's going to follow up, but we like our little odd duck here. So this helps you also uncover differentiators. So when you're looking at differentiators and how you get to be an odd duck, or how you are an odd duck in your space, you want to look at whether or not these differentiators are observable. Are they something that people see and experience that sets you apart? Maybe you have an opportunity for donors to hear stories of people who have benefited from your work. That's something that nobody else does in your space. That would be an example of that. It's very observable. You can see it. People can point to it. The second one is deliberate. So this goes to that experience of trying to uncover the differentiators. A lot of times when we worked with brands over the years, they don't know what makes them different because they're so close to it, and they haven't been deliberate enough about pointing out to understanding what makes them different, and then organizing around it intentionally. So a lot of times you'll hear the phrase, "Oh, that's just how we do things," or "That's just the way we are," and it's sort of dismissed. But when we become aware of what those things are, we can organize, craft, and create around those differentiators. And then finally, daring. You want to make sure that you are bold and pushing the boundaries of an industry standard. And that's a big ask. I realize that that's not like easy thing to do, but if you are bringing new thinking, innovation to an old problem, that's a wonderful brand position to be in at this time in human history. We're entering this age of innovation and invention, as we're taking the technology that has brought us to the 21st century, and now we're inventing really new ways of living and of working. We've seen that over the last couple of years. It's been crazily accelerated, and it's going to continue to shift and change. So if you're part of that movement in some way within your space, that's something to organize around, and be as bold and as daring as you can be around that. The next thing you can do is really push your message to the very edge. Now, I'm not saying one day you sit down, you decide what the new message is, and then it's pushed to the edge, and then you let her rip. Get in a safe space, get in the room with some of the leadership team or your team, and give yourself permission to go to the very edge as an exercise first, to experiment with what's there and what really gets emotional attention. So we do this with our clients. We're like, hey, guess what? We're going to go to the very edge. We're going to say the things that scare us the most. And then we're going to take a breath, and we're going to sit with that. And then we're going to reverse. We can take a step back to where we know it's a message that's going to resonate and not be offensive or exclusionary in any way. But unless you have the mindset of, I'm going to go to the edge, I'm going to step out there, and I might even be like, oh, at first I might be like a little bit, out there, other people might look at me funny. Give yourself permission to do that. That is where the gold is from a messaging standpoint. So I wanted to give you all an example of all of this in practice. This is our client Upbring. They used to be Lutheran Social Services in the state of Texas, and they changed their name about 5 years ago. 2 years ago, when we began working with them, they had a new CEO. It was the first time the CEO was not a member of the Lutheran Church. So it was new leadership, a man of Asian descent. So it was a lot of differences, and he had a different approach as well. The organization was beginning to change its mission to use technology to break the whole cycle of child abuse. And it was coming at it in a very innovative way. And their intention was to raise the standard for everyone else in the space in the state of Texas. They had a message that was fine, but it really was not bold enough to get attention and to define them as innovators in their space. So we worked with them to uncover this message. And abuse, insults our humanity. It's our mission to break that cycle. Again, very simple, unexpected, emotional. Pair it with some really profound visuals, strong visuals, and put it all together. And they've had great success with this. It's definitely something that is different, and has it does this amazing thing. Which this is a big tip here. So branding should not really end a conversation. It should start a conversation. That's why being unexpected or evocative is so important. We need to just be bold enough that someone says, wow, I never heard that said before. Can you explain that more? How do you do that? These are all signs not of poor messaging, but of strong messaging when you're able to extend a conversation. So I want to pause here. I think I'm running a little ahead. I want to pause here and see, Karina, check in if there are any kind of questions.
There are not so far.
Okay. Well, I invite your questions if you have any, and feel free, if they're specific to your organization, to ask away. I'll stop share for a second. And if we can loop back to the beginning, the first poll question, I would love to hear from you as well. If you had a very clear memory of a brand experience that you had, or marketing that you had, that made you make a purchase or make a donation, I'd love to hear, either in chat, or you can even unmute and share what that was and kind of dig into it a little bit.
Just for me personally, I always remember, and I'm sure other people might be able to relate, ASPCA, or I think with Sarah McLachlan singing in the background, and it just always brings me to tears. So that's one of the times where I was like, of course, that emotional attachment, and the sad song, it made me donate.
Yes. Yeah. Another one that I always get moved by is, they don't do as many television ads, but whenever there's a new Nike ad, the last one I recall was Serena Williams, and it was all about the things that people told her about being a girl. And it was so powerful, and they're almost like pieces of art, and it just moves you to want to be a part of that brand. So I think that's another really good example.
Emily, I think a question that has come up in previous trainings is for some of the nonprofits who are volunteer run and are smaller or might have lack of capacity. What are some of the few key things that they could really do to really help their brand?
Yeah, I think one of the most powerful things that you can do is engage in a regular storytelling practice. So that doesn't have to be a big thing, but I think one of the advantages that nonprofits have is that there is usually a lot of stories just within arm's reach about people who have benefited. And so sometimes that can be overwhelming because there is so much. But if you set an intention to tell a story a week in some way, I mean, you may just do that like in a short social media post, or you might do that in a once a month email that really showcases that story. Again, those are opportunities to really connect emotionally and have that neural coupling take place. I think a consistent storytelling practice is something that a department of one can do, or that volunteers can even help cull through. Hey, go through our old Facebook posts and see if there are stories on there. If you have a nonprofit that people are kind of talking about, that's a good way to use resources, and those get shared a lot more than just telling about what your organization does. And that's sort of an instinct in marketing, is to tell instead of show. So this is very common, but by just consistently storytelling, it's a great way to make that connection over and over again with your audience. The other thing you can do is invite stories. Ask your audience, post on Facebook, hey, we're looking for stories to share, whether you've been touched as a volunteer by this organization or you have benefited from their services, our services, please let us know. And doing that also regularly in between when you're sharing stories can help to just get those stories rolling in, so you don't always have to go find them. But if you establish yourself as a brand that has a storytelling culture, and people connect you with that, then they'll be more likely to want to contribute their own stories. I think people get overwhelmed. There's so much to do in marketing. It's totally overwhelming. Where do you start? And we're all about, pick a channel that you like, that's energy positive for you or for your volunteer. Maybe you have somebody who's volunteering to help you with this, and focus in on that channel. Don't worry about sharing with all the other channels. Just focus in on that channel. Give yourself 3 months of just focusing in and see what you can generate. And when I say see what you can generate, I think that's another area where people get really confused. They're like, well, what do I look for? What's the data? Like, how do I know this is working? So you want to look for a steady increase in followership. You want to look for interactivity with your posts. And another key too is if you choose a platform like Instagram and you're dedicated and you're working on it, though that platform has built-in metrics, you can see what's performed the best. And then for a very inexpensive budget, you can begin boosting those posts. And boosting really works to help you expand your followership, expand your visibility. And they give great metrics. I was just going through a few yesterday for our brand. They give you great metrics about what happened to the particular post. So if you do a post, it does really well. Spend just a few minutes, spend just a few dollars and boost it and see what comes of it. But you're very likely to get follower growth from that.
That's an awesome tip. Yeah, I think we have heard storytelling being a very common thread in a lot of the trainings we did. So thank you.
Yeah.
Also, I guess, it is a month away from our Gives Day. So people might not have a chance to do a total overhaul of branding if they find that their brand is putting them to sleep, but come after that and they want to do a rebrand. What are I guess some ways to keep your current people from falling off during a rebranding?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, one way to do that is, and this is something we do with our clients, is we send a pre-session survey to like for Upbring. We did this, right? We actually sent it out to their donors as well. They wanted to cast a wider net. So internally and then to their dedicated donor base. 5-question survey. How does the brand make you feel? Unusual questions that really evoke some interesting answers. And as you do that, you're saying, hey, you let them know we are going through a process of not changing our brand, but digging in deeper. And that's kind of how you want to position it. And then you invite them into the process. So now you've created a little bit of anticipation, and you're also giving them the sense that I'm contributing this way with my own impressions and my own thoughts to the brand process. And it's also particularly for in that case, this was for Lutheran Social Services, very dedicated, committed donors over a long period of time. So they were concerned about, changing up the brand messaging too much. But this really helped a lot of the kind of steadfast volunteers feel like they were part of the process. And then the other thing you can do on the back end is once you're through that process, we don't really believe in doing big brand reveals because everyone's busy. There's too much information, but looping back in meaningful ways to say, hey, we're going to have a get together and talk through our new messaging. We're going to share this. We like to kind of expand brand rollouts into start with a small circle and then a larger circle, and then maybe some ancillary circles off of that to really get the conversation going. And this is a great tip as well. If you're going to work on your brand at all, one thing you want to do is you don't want to ask people what they think. You want to ask people, what does this evoke for you? How did this make you feel? Did any stories come to mind when we shared this? Right? So when we ask people what they think, or we ask them to formulate an opinion, it's suddenly kind of getting into this muddy river of like they're like, oh, well, what do I think? And it doesn't actually trigger the response that the good feedback that you're really looking for.
Thank you. That was a really good tip. Awesome.
Yeah, you are welcome.
Nikki says, it seems to me that doing brand work as an organization, it could pull everyone together internally as well as help externally.
Yeah, Nikki, that's exactly right. Like the way the branding was done in the past was like very siloed. And as I said, very external focused about like, oh, it doesn't matter how we are inside, but we're just going to say this and because it'll sound good and maybe people will like it. But now with it being more of an intrinsic practice in our language, it's really about bringing people together, centering them on the root truth in the organization, which actually helps culture. It helps internal operations even. It boosts communication. It reminds people why they work there and why they like one another, what they have in common. And then the way that we approach branding is that then it becomes the marketing. So it becomes what you're sharing externally. And you don't have to have a separate playbook for, okay, now what are we going to market? You use the brand message that came out of this collaborative effort to connect with your audience and to brand and market. I mean, this all started because I was an internal corporate marketer, and I was just so sick of like all the different messages. And then we have a new campaign and we got to get, and I was like, we have to get to one core truth here and share that consistently, one umbrella that we can also then bring things, underneath the umbrella and share those at different moments when it made sense. And I think that's really what's missing in a lot of organizations is that umbrella philosophy that is a message that you want to share with the world. And then everything else can kind of dovetail from that. But again, be internally relevant and be externally relevant as well. And brands who just want to do the external part, they're really putting themselves at risk, because if they're not truly what they say they are, the brand is completely aspirational in the culture, that will be exposed and your brand will be damaged. I mean, there's so many examples of this. It will all eventually come to light in the information age, and it won't be good for the brand.
Yes, thank you for expanding on that from Nikki. Yes.
Welcome, Nikki. Yeah.
All right. Do we have any other questions? I'll give it a minute or two while everyone is processing all that awesome information from Emily. While we are waiting, I just wanted to drop this session feedback survey for everyone to fill out. That's really helpful to the Alliance as well as our speakers, so we can continue to improve on the trainings we offer to you. And if you complete it within a week of today, you can enter for a drawing to win $25 off any Alliance training through the rest of the year. So definitely want to take advantage of that. Any other questions?
One other thing I want to mention too, if you are going to be working on the brand, and if you're going to be spearheading that, you're going to be doing that with a team or volunteers. One way to really kind of set your mind is to think about when you're in the creation phase of branding. A lot of people think branding is about getting all the people to show up and like you, and it's all about acceptance. And we're hardwired as human beings for acceptance, to be in the tribe, to want to really be belong, right? We're wired for belonging. But when you're in the space of branding, what is much more productive as a mindset in that creative space is to think about the fact that branding is much more about repelling than it is about attracting, right? So we want to, I know that, and that might be a tough idea, but we want to repel the people who don't believe what we believe as quickly and efficiently as possible, so we can work with and attract the people who are aligned with our organization, who do want to fight for that. And the people that don't, there's no judgment, but they would, if they are not sure, or they're misaligned, they will come into the organization and be a drain of time, resources, and energy. So if we're bold and daring enough in our messaging, then we can trigger that repulsion, and that's a really good thing, particularly when you're going to the edge and you're starting out and looking at the brand and being really honest about the places where it's dull or expected, and just giving yourself, again, permission to be repellent. If anything, just for the creative exercise of finding out how far you can push your message.
I actually had another question. Can you speak a little to getting, I guess, maybe leadership inside your nonprofit to get on board with evaluating branding?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yes, I think you can use some of the tools that I talked about, and I'm sure, Karina, you can send out the presentation. I hope you will. So that slide that has those common words is a great one to take. Do that little audit of your website, highlight those phrases, highlight any other cliches or colloquialisms. And that can be a good conversation starter. Like, hey, I took the initiative to kind of go through and see where we are with our message. And this is what I found. We're really repeating these same phrases that, maybe you do that too for a competitor. They're using these same phrases. This is why I really want to dig into the message and uncover something that is a little bit, that's going to make us stand out, right? That's really going to organize us around our differentiators. So that can be a really powerful way of starting that conversation and getting the buy-in. If you're going to, seek outside counsel, we always offer conversations with leadership to help them understand the process and what the outcomes will be. So anyone that you're working with should probably just be able to do that for you. And that has been really helpful. So once the leadership knows you're seeking some outside opinions on this that have experience there, they listen differently. They're like, okay, good, bad, and different. That's just sort of been our experience. And then I think the other idea is that, the brand is really the part of the organization that touches all other parts. And so if we're looking at and improving our operations, at improving our efficiency as a marketing team, as a communications team, as a whole organization, brand needs to be an essential part of that, because we can have so many efficiencies that we can take if we have a very clear brand that is, you feel confident delivering as the leader. This is going to benefit you directly in conversations and speaking engagements, and just show them how it makes their life a little bit easier. And that can help them get engaged in the process.
Yeah, definitely. That's great. Did you want to still share that QR code?
Yeah, thank you. And so if you are interested in learning more about our approach, we have a community called Being Marketers. And it's very affordable, and we have weekly coaching on branding and marketing strategies. We present challenges once a month for you to continually work on your brand and kind of dig into it. And the first month is always free. So would love to see you in the community, or if you would recommend it to other people, if you get in and like it, that would be great too. But we also have a variety of free resources on our website, rootandriver.com. So feel free to go there as well.
Great, awesome. If there are no more questions, I just wanted to highlight in the chat, we have a couple upcoming events We have integrating accessibility into your organization. So that one's great if you're working on DEI in your organization. We also have on the same day, powering up nonprofit advocacy. And then we also have our last Arizona Gives workshop before Arizona Gives Day, which is Relationship Building 201. And the recording of 101 is available on our AZ Give site. So just a reminder, please do fill out that session survey. And then we will send an email tomorrow with a link to the recording, the slide deck, and any of the other articles and resources that Emily mentioned. So thank you, Emily, so much for your time today. And we hope to see everyone at our next workshop. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.